Why learning English feels so hard? If learning English feels exhausting, if it feels frustrating, if it feels like you're constantly trying but never reaching the level you want, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not broken. Think about how long you've been studying English. Maybe since primary school, maybe for more than 10 years. That's a huge amount of time. Enough time to learn an instrument, enough time to master a sport, enough time to build a career. And yet, you still hesitate when you speak. You still translate in your head. You still freeze in real conversations. You still avoid speaking because you're afraid of sounding stupid. That pain is real. That frustration is real. And it hurts even more when people say things like, you just need to practice more. You need more vocabulary. You need to review your grammar again. Because deep down, you already did all of that. You studied vocabulary lists, you filled notebooks with grammar rules, you watched videos, you downloaded apps, you bought books, you tried courses, and still, speaking feels hard. So, what happens next? You start blaming yourself. Maybe I am not smart enough. Maybe my memory is bad. Maybe languages are not for me, maybe I started too late. But let me tell you something very clearly. That story in your head is a lie. The problem is not you, the problem is how you are taught. From the very beginning, English was presented to you as a school subject, not as a living language. You were trained to pass exams, not to communicate. You were trained to recognize correct answers, not to produce your own thoughts. Think about your classes. What did most lessons look like? A teacher explaining grammar on the board, students copying rules into notebooks, exercises like choose the correct option, fill in the blanks, match the words. This trains your brain to analyze language slowly and consciously. But real communication is fast, emotional, automatic, and imperfect. Real English doesn't wait for you to think, okay, present perfect, subject, auxiliary verb, past participate. By the time you finish thinking, the conversation is already gone. And that's why your brain freezes. Not because you don't know enough, but because you were trained in the wrong mode. You trained your brain to be a grammar machine, but speaking requires your brain to be a communication machine. These are completely different skills. It's like training for years to solve math equations and then being suddenly asked to dance on a stage. You might be intelligent, you might be disciplined, but the training simply doesn't match the task. And here is the painful part. Most learners never realize this. They just keep studying harder. More rules, more books, more apps, more pressure. And the harder they try, the more frustrated they become. Because the real issue is never addressed. Let me say something that might sound uncomfortable, but is actually very freeing. You were taught to understand English, you were not taught to use English. Understanding is passive, using is active. And fluency only comes from active skills. You can understand hundreds of grammar rules and still be unable to speak. You can know thousands of words and still be unable to form natural sentences. You can score high on exams and still feel powerless in real life. That's not a failure of intelligence, that's a failure of method. And once you truly understand this, something powerful happens. You stop blaming yourself, you stop feeling ashamed, you stop thinking you are bad at English. Instead, you begin to ask a better question. If this method didn't work, what kind of method would? And this is where everything changes. Because the real solution is not studying harder, it's studying differently. Fluency doesn't come from memorizing. Fluency comes from familiarity, from repetition in context, from hearing real English again and again, from using small phrases every day, from speaking imperfectly but constantly. Babies don't learn their first language by studying grammar. They learn by listening thousands of hours. They learn by copying sounds. They learn by making mistakes without shame. They learn by being surrounded by the language emotionally. Your brain hasn't changed since childhood. It still learns in the same way. But school taught you to ignore this natural system. It taught you to rely on logic instead of intuition, on analysis instead of reaction, on perfection instead of communication. That's why English feels heavy. That's why it feels stressful. That's why it feels like pressure instead of freedom. Because you're trying to run with muscles that were trained only to sit. But here's the hope. The moment you shift your training, your brain starts responding almost immediately. When you stop memorizing and start absorbing, when you start translating and start connecting meaning directly, when you stop fearing mistakes and start allowing yourself to sound human, English becomes lighter, faster, more natural. You start recognizing phrases instead of individual words. You start responding instead of thinking. You start feeling the rhythm instead of calculating structure. And slowly, almost quietly, something beautiful happens. You stop studying English, you start living with English. You begin to think small thoughts in English. You react emotionally in English. You notice patterns naturally. You catch expressions without effort. Not because you're suddenly smarter, but because you're finally using the correct process. And this is what nobody told you in school. You don't need more pressure. You don't need more discipline. You don't need more complicated materials. You need the right type of exposure, the right type of repetition, the right type of practice. You need to hear English that feels real. You need to repeat phrases that feel useful. You need to use English in situations that feel personal. And yes, you will still make mistakes, a lot of them. But here's the difference. Now, mistakes will no longer feel like proof of failure. They will feel like signs of growth. Because every mistake means you are actually using the language. And usage is the only path to fluency. The most dangerous place for your English is not incorrect speech. The most dangerous place is silence. Silence feels safe. Silence protects your ego. Silence hides your mistakes. But silence also kills your progress. Every time you choose to speak, even badly, your brain adapts. Every time you try to express a thought, even awkwardly, your brain learns. Every time you expose yourself to real English, even if you don't understand everything, your brain improves. Fluency is not built through comfort. Fluency is built through gentle, consistent discomfort. Not extreme stress, not anxiety, not perfectionism. Just small daily moments of challenge. And if right now you feel tired, if you feel behind, if you feel like others are better than you, if you feel like you wasted years, I want you to hear this deeply. Those years were not wasted because of you. Those were wasted because of the system. But your future progress, that part is in your control. You can rebuild your relationship with English. You can retrain your brain. You can create a new experience with the language. One that feels lighter, one that feels more natural, one that feels more human. You don't need to become a perfect speaker. You don't need to sound like a native. You don't need advanced grammar. You need clarity. You need consistency. You need permission to be imperfect. And once you give yourself that permission, something changes inside you. You stop fighting English, you stop fearing English, you stop judging yourself through English. And slowly, you start trusting yourself. That trust is where fluency begins. Not in books, not in rules, not in exams. But in the quiet moment when you realize, I can express myself even if it's not perfect, even if it's slow, even if it's simple. That moment is powerful. Because that moment means you are no longer a student of English, you are a user of English. And users always improve. So no, learning English is not hard because you are weak. It's hard because you were trained wrong. But the moment you change the method, the moment you change the mindset, the moment you stop blaming yourself, English stops being your enemy. It becomes a tool, a voice, a bridge, a new part of your identity. And you deserve that. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.